Welcome to Decoded, providing in-depth insight into cybersecurity. What does it mean to test like a hacker? Can a well-intentioned tester behave the same as a real cybercriminal? And when you're looking for a good security test, how can you tell the useful from the misleading? Our email accounts sit at the center of our digital lives. We look at ways to bulletproof your most important internet account. To discuss these questions and more, we're joined by Frank Duff, who used to work at MITRE, Mike Sentonas from CrowdStrike, and Siggi Stefnisson from Avast. Show notes, including any links mentioned in the show, are available at decodedcyber.com. There are many different ways to test cybersecurity products. Most of the common approaches are useful when evaluating a service or system, but they each have their pros and cons. There's penetration testing, for example, where testers have a limited amount of time to focus on either bypassing security products completely or breaking those products. Simulation tools generate data that looks like a real attack, but isn't. The idea is to see how a security product would work when a real attack happens, and there is what we do at SE Labs, the full real attack. Otherwise known as full attack chain testing or red team testing, this approach basically puts the tester into the role of a real adversary. There is little to no automation, just a skilled team of hackers attacking targets while recording how defensive tools handle the situation and to what extent. Frank Duff is the man behind the MITRE security evaluations. Frank built the MITRE attack evaluations program from the very start and ran it as the general manager for 4 years. Today, he is the Chief Services Officer of Tidal Cyber, educating organizations on the cyber threats they face. Frank, can you explain a little about what an attack chain is and why it's important in testing?
Attack chains, as we consider them, or other people will call it attack flows as well, is about chaining together behaviors that are related. So what that could mean is I need to, for instance, dump credentials so I can get an additional credential. I need to do network discovery to understand where I'm going to go next so that I can actually perform the goal of the lateral movement and move to the next host. So in that case, you're talking about a 3-step chain to achieve a goal.
Which is what the bad guys would do in the real world.
Exactly. It's about making it real, related to what the bad guys have to do to achieve their goals, their mission. When I like to consider testing, a lot of tests can't be done in just isolation of a single step, for instance. Instead, what you need to do is consider those multiple pieces that need to be pulled together. Why that matters for testing and why you can't just go the atomic route is because each one of those steps offers potential for increased protection detection capability and improved performance of those by correlating back to the behavior that was before them. So what that means is maybe that third activity, that lateral movement in my example, isn't enough to really raise the level of concern on its own. But when you couple that with the credential dumping that happened right before it and the network discovery that happened right before it, suddenly that thing becomes of much higher importance, right? It tells you something a lot more when you understand it. Similarly, in like a protection test, a lot of these tools are going to stop that credential dumping. And so the discovery that might have come afterwards or the lateral movement that might have come afterwards wouldn't have even been able to happen. So that's why these chains matter, because each of these atomic behaviors can do a certain amount of capabilities on their own, but understanding the bigger picture really gives you an idea of how that tool would perform under realistic conditions.
Using the full attack chain or behaving like an attacker from the very start of an attack and working through all phases until the end is a great way to test security products. Different vendors take different approaches to solving the cybersecurity problem, and if a tester only looks at one part of the attack chain, the products won't always be able to function as designed. Results in what Frank calls an atomic test, where only a part of the product is assessed, might show that it doesn't work, but in a full attack chain test, it might stop the threat at an earlier stage and completely halt the attack. Maybe testing using the full attack chain is the best way to run a test in a technical sense. But is that all anyone cares about? What about the ethics behind testing? Do all testers operate with the same level of competence and honesty? Mike Sentonas is CTO of cybersecurity company CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike focuses on endpoint detection and response. Its goal is to identify not just one part of an attack on a network, but to put together the pieces of a full attack campaign and fix things across the whole organization. Mike, when you look at tests, other than using the full attack chain, what else really makes you sit up and pay attention?
The big thing for us is transparency. When everybody knows what the rules are, when it's not sort of a pay-to-play sort of test that's behind the curtain and then you just put out a result. We want to work with testing centers. We use the test to build better products. At the end of the day, I'd rather be finding holes in the products that we provide. I'd rather find the gaps. I'd rather find the areas that we need to improve before an adversary finds them and uses it in a way that impacts one of our customers. So transparent testing is key. As you know, Simon, we do it all the time. We're constantly testing our products every single day. And, we challenge the team internally to engage in all of the tests. We focus on having a testing transparency page. So on our website, you can go and find out our results from all the tests that we've done, and you can track us over time. And I think that's really important.
Realism is important in testing. If you want to work out if a product protects against hackers, you need to take on the role of a real attacker. But it's not enough to know you're doing a good test. You need to be able to show you're working. How can others tell that your work is good enough? Transparency is the best thing for this. And, sure, it can highlight problems in a test, but if a tester is honest and well-intentioned, they'll find positive criticism useful. As we'll see a bit later, one of the reasons our tests are good is because we explain everything that we do and listen to feedback. But not every tester seems willing to do that. How do you spot a good test from the bad? As Mike and others on this podcast mention, transparency is the key. Historically, antivirus testing has lacked a lot of transparency. The reasons for this span good to bad, all the way to corrupt. Now, let's not forget that the security industry sells products, billions of dollars worth a year. So a cynical tester may choose to share almost nothing with the vendors. They see the vendors as opponents. They hold their billion-dollar businesses to account. You guys say you stop hackers, but do you really? And sharing information can help vendors perform unrealistically well in a test. Cheating, some might call it. We're going to do a special episode on cheating in security tests later in this series, so subscribe now, and you won't miss our probably most controversial set of conversations. But anyway, some testers don't want to share because they don't trust the vendors to work in good faith with them. Other testers know that their work is biased, possibly because they're paid to produce certain results. Now, that sounds shocking to me as I say it out loud. But Mike mentioned just now about pay-to-play tests. And I've seen myself 2 vendors fight it out in public by paying the same tester to compare their products, the same products. And guess what? In both cases, the paying vendor won the bake-off. That sounds corrupt to me. And at the other end, you have fully transparent testers who may be more or less competent. The poor testers expose their methods and receive feedback, and some of that can be aggressive, but that can be the price of learning to do a good job. And some are competent, and these guys stand out from the crowd. To help improve the transparency in antivirus testing, the Anti-Malware Testing Standards Organization, or AMTSO, created a standard. Now, this standard doesn't tell testers how to test from a technical point of view. It requires that they say what they're going to do, then they actually do what they said, and finally, they should be prepared to prove it. Now, to me, that sounds completely reasonable, which is why all SE Labs' enterprise, small business, and home user anti-malware testing conforms to this standard. But we're in a very distinct minority. Why is this? Some testers might say, well, we do the same things the standard requires, so we don't need to use the standard. But the problem with this approach is that we then have to trust the tester completely. With the AMSO standard, there is some oversight from a third party. AMSO verifies the tester's claims of transparency, and it's not hard work to deal with AMSO. Which then raises the question, why not engage? Well, I'll leave it to your imagination why a tester that is aware of AMSO chooses to ignore it. Having the AMSO stamp of approval doesn't mean the testing is technically good, though. It just means that the tester has shown enough detail for you, the reader of its reports, to decide whether to give it any credibility or not. And if the test involves, I don't know, throwing bananas at PCs protected by different antivirus programs, then you wouldn't trust the results. But at least you'd know not to trust them, because the standard directed the tester to publish its methodology, which would involve bananas in this case. So when you see reports that allude to clever techniques but provide no real detail, well, you can't trust them much more than anonymous reviewers on YouTube. Your email account is one of the most important that you have. This is because it's usually the way other services confirm your identity. Banks, utility companies, and other important organizations connect your real-world accounts with your email address. If you forget a password, you'll most likely be able to reset it using email. And this presents an opportunity for attackers. If they can gain control of your email account, they stand a good chance of being able to access other accounts. Your personal email account is a gateway to your digital life, and your business email account can be abused in many other ways too. So let's ensure they're as secure as possible. But first, we need to know about the threats. Christian Seifert headed up Microsoft's email security program. Christian, are email attacks the same today as they were when we received poorly formatted, spammy requests to reset our PayPal accounts?
Phishing attacks are becoming more sophisticated. I think the phishing attacks that we are dealing with today, as opposed to many years ago, are very different, much harder to spot. Now, I think there is training that users are able to go through, and for the enterprise, we have our training and simulation solution that helps end users to spot these sort of attacks. But as I say, they're becoming much more sophisticated, right? And so I think there are certain types of attacks that probably you and I would fall victims to, because they're not easy to spot. So think of like, hey, there is a compromised account that now sends me a mail that contains an OAuth link, right? So the link itself actually points to a legitimate service. It actually points to the Microsoft service. And as I click on it, it would lead me to essentially a permission screen of an app that the attacker has created that if I click through, would give that attacker access to my mail, access to my cloud resources. I think those sort of attacks are extremely difficult to spot. And so I think it is really essential to have comprehensive security solutions that have broad visibility across the entire enterprise. So not just looking at the email component, but also looking at what happens afterwards, right? Like, hey, user clicks on the link, maybe it gives up their credentials, right? And so now, how are these credentials used? And so you really need to have a comprehensive security solution with, defense in depth in order to defend against those sort of attacks. I don't think it's as easy anymore as, hey, we do training, we ask users to spot phishing attacks, and then we're good.
Yes, and actually, even those who know what they're doing can easily be tricked, say in Outlook on a Windows PC, but it's actually even harder when you start looking at mobile devices because you can't hover over links, for example, to see where they really go to.
That's right. And I mean, I think mobile devices with kind of the limited real estate make and kind of the way users can interact with the application make that more difficult. But I think the client providers need to be able to surface the kind of UI indicators that would help users to make an assessment. But then again, it really comes back to having a comprehensive security solution, because we cannot rely on the user being able to spot that attack and not click on it. So we need to look at how do we prevent the mail from getting into the inbox? How do we train users to spot the mails? But then also what happens afterwards in kind of the post-breach scenario? How do we detect those and provide the SecOps with the information, with the tools to spot that and remediate quickly?
That's great. And that leads me on to a very important question. How do you choose a good security solution? So obviously Microsoft has got its set up, Google's got its, and there are lots and lots of third-party products and services available. And of course, there are some tests out there which try to assess them. So how would you go about, if you were starting at square one, trying to work out which would be the best products to get hold of?
The security solutions really need to be integrated and cover the attack landscape across the entire kill chain, right? Like we want to make sure that the security solution essentially provides defense in depth, right? So if a mail gets incorrectly classified as good, like a fish mail incorrectly classified as good, well, what comes afterwards that protect the enterprise? So I think it needs to be a comprehensive security solution that looks at, mail, web, identity, and those solutions should be integrated, because I think there's a lot of value of utilizing signals across the different products and services. So for instance, if we're thinking about a mail that comes in that has a link, well, that link has a lot of information associated with it that allows us on the Microsoft side pivot into data sources that allows us to get a good security relevant signals from that information. So for instance, the IP address that is associated on where the link is hosted, the website is hosted, allows Microsoft, for instance, to pivot into Bing data, where we're able to now assess, well, how popular is that website? What else is hosted on that IP address? What are some of the queries that are used to find that website in the search engine? And those are all threat-relevant signals that we're able to leverage to protect customers.
And the customer themselves would never be able to detect that just by looking at an email or knowing whether to click or not. So you're providing a lot of backup security to those people who are going to fall for the phishing attacks.
Absolutely. And then, if I think about, security solutions for a particular area like email, I think the third-party tests are extremely valuable, because I think it is an objective way executed by an independent third party like SC Labs that really allows customers to get an apples-to-apples comparison of the various security products. Now, one thing I would say there is tests are just one signal that a customer should utilize in making a decision. There is, analyst reports like Forrester and Gartner that look at a particular area and provide a comparative analysis. I would also recommend that customers sign up for a trial and try out the product, do side-by-side comparison to see for themselves.
You're absolutely right. A security test is one data signal, and services like Office 365 and Google and Mimecast and Proofpoint and all those guys, they've all got lots of different configuration settings that can be used. So when a tester tests any kind of security service, really, they have to imagine what kind of organization that they're pretending to be, because testing with default settings, again, it's a valid thing to do because you're showing how effective those default settings are. But I don't know if you've got any telemetry, but how many big organizations are likely to install Office 365 and not change any security settings at all? I'm suspecting it's quite a low number.
Well, I think what we are working towards is ensuring that the security settings are actually enabled by default. So the product does work out of the box. There are certainly kind of unique circumstances that may necessitate some customizations, and we're providing the tools and the reports that allow an enterprise to configure the product even further. So for instance, you're able to turn on a particular security feature essentially in silent mode and see kind of how the product behaves if that security option were turned on. And so I think that allows customers to kind of ease into it, right? And kind of shepherd the process through, where first, hey, it gets turned into silent mode. Now they're getting the telemetry. They're able to assess, hey, how's the product behaving? And if the results look good, then they're able to turn it into enforcing mode.
And there's quite a simple thing that people can do as well, isn't there, with quarantines? With a quarantine, you can restrict who has access to that. So maybe your analysts or your administrators can see malware or suspected malware that's been sent to a quarantine, rather than allowing all users to dig through and maybe get tricked again into pulling something out.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think, we're in the email space. We're not just classifying, hey, is it bad or not? Because if you look at the bad classification, there's a spectrum, right? We have, of course, phishing attacks, credential-based phishing attacks, or business email compromise attempts. These are really security events, right? Or it pose a security risk. We want to make sure that those sort of mails don't make it anywhere close into the user's inbox. Those should really go to the SecOps team because it's a security relevant event. But then at the same time, spam messages, they're more a nuisance, right? They're not necessarily a security relevant event. And so those we can deliver to the user in a separate folder, a junk folder. But we don't want to send those to the SecOps, because it's not necessarily a security relevant event. The SecOps already has a lot of alerts to deal with, and so we want to make sure that they are able to, that they get the cleanest signal possible around the security relevant events.
And when a tester, any tester, does a test of an email security service, how much attention should they pay to these different routes of threats or potential threats through the system?
Well, I think they should pay quite a lot of attention to those. I know the SE Labs test today is more around, hey, do we detect a bad mail or not, right? That's kind of a binary decision. But if we're thinking about the customer experience, the SecOps and how overloaded they are with alerts today, as well as the end users, I think a more nuanced assessment would be beneficial.
Yeah, and actually, I completely agree. And I'm not trying to sort of push SE Labs testing, but actually we do look at the user experience. So we score more highly the further a product or service keeps the threat away from the user. So quarantining it where the admin can get to it is great. Quarantining it where the user can get to it is less good. So that's where configurations come in to play. If you're a small business and you've just installed Office 365, I'm not even sure quarantine's turned on by default, but if it is, I'm pretty sure users can get access to their own quarantines, whereas a larger organization with a SecOps team may be inclined to configure it differently and have threats sent to a repository.
Yeah, but Simon, one thing to take into consideration, if we put everything into quarantine for the SecOps, that is a lot of volume, right? And it contains things like spam messages that are not posing a security relevant event. And so that leads to a lot of unnecessarily response work on the SecOps side. And so I think a more nuanced approach on evaluation would be good, where we're looking at, hey, the security relevant mails like phish, they're ending up in quarantine, whereas the more nuisance mails around spam end up in junk. I think that would be the ideal experience.
Many of us have email passwords that are far too obvious. Why not make it harder to hack? And even easier to remember. Just choose 3 random words for your email password. Like cardigan, snail, move. And take your email security to another level. Search Cyber Aware.
In 2022, the UK government launched a campaign to improve the nation's cybersecurity. The advice was good. It was simple, and if anyone followed it, they would end up with stronger passwords. Passwords play a crucial part in securing email accounts, but there is so much more to it. Email security is built into many of the services that we all use. That said, default settings are often not very aggressive, so if you want to beef up your email security, you will need to dig into those and maybe do some other things too. To find out how we can do this for business or personal purposes, I spoke to Siggi Stefnisson. Siggi is head of the threat lab at security company Avast. He's been in the industry for over 25 years, and he's been dealing with cyber threats of one sort or another since his first role as a malware researcher. Before he joined Avast, he spent many years heading up an email security company in his native Iceland. Siggi, is having a strong password safe enough?
No. Username and password would not be enough. I would look at having some form of second factor authentication as well. It's too easy nowadays to break up the passwords, and unless you have a very long one, and it's something you should look at anyway. We still have, if you go and look online, what are the most commonly used passwords, you can see that we still tend to make them too short, too easy to crack, and having other means to authenticate is also important. So something like a second factor authentication, having that turned on, I would say is very critical.
I think email companies are getting a bit better at forcing this now, are they?
They are. You can see more and more companies doing this, but and I think the bigger vendors are definitely putting that in, but there's still a significant amount of smaller vendors that don't yet have this.
And given the choice, if you have a choice between using, say, an app like Google Authenticator or having a text message sent to your phone, what would your preference be?
I would use the Authenticator, or one form of them. There are several of them out there, but for instance, I use the Google Authenticator. I find it quite useful.
But it's good for other accounts as well, isn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely. It goes well beyond your email, obviously.
With text message authentication, I think there may be 1 or 2 security issues with that as well.
If you're getting an SMS as a second factor authentication, it's not going to be enough. Those can be spoofed, and don't believe it's enough. So I would use a stronger form than that.
Yes, and I think the issue is that people can hijack those SMS messages and use them to log in.
Exactly.
And I think there have even been some bank robberies done using that.
Exactly.
But the authenticators are safer?
I find so.
With your own email accounts, you've probably got 2-factor authentication.
Mm-hmm.
Do you use multiple accounts for different things?
Yes. So I think the last time I counted, I have about 9 different email addresses, which for most people is not necessary, but you want to have one for your general, one for the less savory stuff that needs to go out there. I need to find a better word than savory here, but it's good to have multiple things out there.
Well, yes, but you're a researcher, aren't you? So you're probably purposely delving into some of the horrible parts of the internet, whereas most people hopefully are staying away from the really risky stuff.
But even so, I mean, if you think about how much spam you end up getting by using your email address out there, I think it's generally good to have something that you use for more formal business than what you use to kind of subscribe to things online.
Mm-hmm. Is it worth checking your email settings every so often to make sure that there aren't some strange forwarding rules or something?
Absolutely. You do want to check your settings. You also want to make sure that things might change. Updates come to, if you're using external vendor for your email service, things might change. They might have updated some settings and so on, usually for good, but you want to go and take a look at it and see what's going on and ensure that things are as you want them to be and as you expect them to be. So it's very important to do that.
So why would a bad guy sort of mess with your settings? What could they achieve there?
If you can put in a forwarding rule to where every one of your emails redirect, or certain types of email being redirected. If you have, let's say you go to a website where you're having your password reset and somebody has gotten into your email and has allowed that every email from that site to then be redirected to their place, they can use it as a way to get in. In short, if somebody has the ability to kind of do those, you can assume they have access to your full email. So,
do you think there's much benefit in using one of these so-called very secure email services like Proton Mail?
It can be. I mean, one of my accounts is on Proton Mail. Like, and again, I like to kind of test out different services. It really comes down to what you're after, depending on your use case, I would say.
Yeah, I think with Proton Mail, it's the benefit there, encryption rather than stopping people actually breaking into your account.
I would say it's encryption.
Mm-hmm. So at the moment, we've got multi-factor authentication to stop people logging in.
Mm-hmm.
We've got choose a service that has some kind of that's recognized as being decent, and then check your settings as well. Make sure that someone hasn't come in and leaking your email out to themselves.
Yes.
Anything else that occurs to you?
Well, one of the things we gotta think about is in the nature of with malware and threats and all of that, you want to make sure you have some kind of security solution that is ensuring that you don't get any of it. What you'll find is none of the services out there are perfect. Things do escape through. So having an additional layer of security on top of that, I would say, is crucial. We get too many phishing attacks and malware attacks and social engineering attacks coming through email that just having something else on top of that is also something you want to have.
What's another service, or are you talking about changing the default configuration?
This can't be, it's some kind of security solution. It could be something, it could be like a traditional AV on top of it. It can be there are like several Caspi solutions out there that allow you to kind of hook into your email to scan it in addition to what the servers are doing, and so on. It's something of that nature. What I would do is I would make sure that I have some form of antivirus or good strong security solution running on my computer, just to make sure that that gets blocked. But those things can't reach in to Gmail or Outlook or those like that easily. So I think there's an importance to have something else as well that can be a layer on top of it, because we do see things coming through from there.
Could you maybe talk a little bit about the kind of configuration options that are available, such as file types that you can set in Office 365 to be blocked, and maybe the idea of viewing documents online rather than opening them in Word where an exploit might kick in?
Mm-hmm. So setting up the ability to kind of choose which file types can be helpful. For instance, like right now, if you look at it, I think most of the places don't allow executables anymore to flow through. I think JavaScripts and zip files, for instance, were stopped when Lucky was spreading. And having the ability to kind of go down and say, I don't want those particular file types can be a good thing for you, especially if something new kind of spreads out. Like the benefit of viewing an Office document online means that the macros won't be running on your computer.
Mm.
And within the scope of those macros, that's where you're going to be seeing a lot of the malware, not necessarily all of it, but a lot of the malware will be executed through that. So doing it online, you can kind of quickly see if this is something relevant for me, is this something that I'm expecting to see, and it will be a little bit more secure than getting it straight to your computer and running it.
So it's a little bit like looking at it in a sandbox rather than downloading it and running it on your system.
Yes. The stuff that I worry most about with email is the attacks we see. It's the phishing attacks we're seeing. It's the social engineering attacks. It's the people tricking you into doing things you don't want to do, phishing and malware and so on. And I think that's some of the biggest risks I see around email. Like obviously you got to lock it down and just to make sure nobody gets to it, because as you kind of stated earlier, this is what we use as one of our key things to identify who we are. It's the beginning. It's often the username for a lot of different services. And I worry about the attacks that people are getting. There are too many things floating out there. People are being targeted to trick them into doing things they shouldn't and don't want to do. And you see that both for business and for consumer as well. And you can also see like some of these things that are being out there. You can see bomb threats being sent out to people where they're saying effectively that if you don't pay me Bitcoin, I'm going to do something. I'm going to obviously detonate that. People claiming they have pictures of you in various
compromising situations.
Thank you. Exactly. And again, pay Bitcoin or pay some kind of cryptocurrency if you don't don't want that to happen. And those are kind of the aspects that I tend to worry a lot about on an email.
I suppose at the end of the day, email is just a communication tool, but arguably it's one of the least secure available to us now because we're used to chatting on WhatsApp or Telegram or whatever.
Yep.
And regardless of various issues with Facebook and so on, they are encrypted, whereas by default, emails just aren't, are they?
That's true. And I mean, and then there are several places online that are trying to solve that and add in the encryption layer. And those are definitely something we should be doing. But I don't think email is going away. It's one of those services that we keep saying everybody's going to move over to other form. But I honestly think as long as it's still one of the only ways we have for normal people to talk to businesses and vice versa. You can see Facebook trying to achieve that to some degree, but not everybody's on Facebook. You can see other social networking sites trying to do that, but still today, email is the main tool for us to communicate to businesses and from businesses to us. And I don't see that shifting in the near future.
No, and even legal firms who are possibly the slowest types of organization to adopt technology, they have their own even special ways of faxing things. They've just about got their heads around email now. I don't think they're ready to move on to messaging just yet.
No, exactly. And it's going to stick around for a while. But hopefully, eventually, we'll get to a place where we'll have something different and more secure. But I think we stuck with email for some years more.
Attackers change how they behave over time. They learn, and they want to get past the security measures that we all use. As the security world evolves to stop them, so the bad guys change tactics to keep up their evil work. Tricking people might be easier than writing new malware that can evade detection. Everyone has email, so of course the attackers focus on that vector. The UK government reported this year that nearly 90% of all cyber attacks started with email phishing attacks. Now, even experienced people in security can be tricked, as Christian mentioned earlier, and I myself was completely fooled not that long ago. The short story is that I'd just recently set up a new mobile phone account for a family member. I received a text message sometime later asking to verify some account details. Now, it appeared to come from the same mobile supplier, so it seemed completely reasonable to answer the questions. Now, here's the thing. When it got to the stage where it wanted credit card details, I couldn't send them because I was otherwise engaged and couldn't access my wallet at the time. But once I was able to move around, I suddenly realized that this felt scammy. Why would the company need my credit card details again? And given a moment to think, I realized, and later confirmed, that it was a scam. The message sender used a web address that was very similar to the real supplier. And probably it was dumb luck that they hit me shortly after I'd set up a new account. Or not, in which case that supplier has a real security problem. The bad guys are clever and persistent, and it takes minimal effort to spam loads of us potential victims with email and text messages in the hope of finding a few who happen to have signed up with a new supplier. Now, as everyone was saying at the start of this episode, security testing needs to be realistic. This applies as much to email testing as anything else. There's a lot of social engineering involved, not just virus samples you can download from the internet, which is why our email team spends time pretending to fall for scams. That way, we learn how the bad guys behave and can create realistic tests that work in the same way. In the following clip, you can hear one of our security team pretending to fall for a fraud that started with an email. And that way we know what else you can expect should you also fall for such trickery, and we can add it to our tests.
Oh, the transfer. Hello? Hello?
Yeah. I just received the message. And you will be required to pay for non-resident opening account, which is £260.
Oh, okay. What? I need to pay 250.
Yeah. Before the transfer will be completed into your account in UK.
Oh, okay. Could you send over a transfer link then? I'll get that sent to you.
Yes, I send an email now. With the information you can use to send the payment, either MoneyGram or RIA. Okay?
And now, just before we finish, it's security life hack time. At the end of each episode, we give a special security tip that works for real people in the real world, for work and in personal lives. This episode's life hacker is convicted cybercriminal and connoisseur of classic cars, coffee and cameras, Dan Cuthbert.
So here is an amazing life hack for you. If you wanted to make your passphrase super secure, and one that's not necessarily impacted by rainbow tables, why not choose a different keyboard layout? Why not choose different languages when you are making your passphrase, such as a mixture of English, Bulgarian, Russian, German, Czech, or whatever? The likelihood of a rainbow table having the hash value for your amazing concoction is incredibly small.
Please subscribe, and if you enjoyed this episode, please send a link to just one of your close colleagues. We also have a free email newsletter. Sign up on our website, where you'll also find this episode's show notes and bonus episodes featuring full-length interviews with our guests. Just visit DECODEDcyber.com. And that's it. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again soon.